Did you know that Travis Kelce averaged 4 targets per game in just 3 games with Rashee Rice last year? Did you know that Xavier Worthy scored 19.6 or more PPR fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games, including the playoffs last season? Did you know we're going to talk about Rashee Rice at the top of the show? We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. It's Wednesday, August 27th. We've got that breaking news to get to, but also the do not draft list. You know, guys, you better relish this now. I love talking about drafts, but in 8 days, that is pretty much over. We're going to be talking about starts and sits. Welcome to the show. That's Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. I am Adam Azer. Let's get right into the big news. So you're going to give us do not drafts for quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver. First, though, Rashee Rice accepts a 6-game suspension to start this season. Jamey, I'm going to throw it to you first. Give me your reaction for everyone relevant in this Rashee Rice discussion.
I think it's actually good news that he's accepting the suspension prior to the season for a couple of reasons. One, at least we find out for anybody drafting over Labor Day weekend or from this point through the start of the season, you know what you're dealing with. So the uncertainty of the previous situation, which was he was going to play out the first 4 games and then we wouldn't know when the suspension would happen. You now know that the first 6 weeks of the season you don't have Rashee Rice. I think from his perspective, he's still a number 3 wide receiver. He's going to hopefully come back from week 7 on. They do have their week 10 bye. But now you get him for the fantasy playoffs, assuming he's healthy, and hopefully whatever extra time he needed to get that knee right, now he should be 100%, no questions. Not that there was any concern right now, but you know what you're getting. I think from a fantasy perspective, I'm not moving him. He's wide receiver 33. I know what I'm dealing with at this point, and you have the ability to get replacement options to start the season. It does stink. I was in one draft over the weekend where somebody combined Jordan Addison and Rashee Rice with the hope of I get Addison coming back when Rice is back. Now you don't have both those guys for the start of the season. I'm in a dynasty league that Adam runs, the Big Burger Dynasty League, where I have Rice and Chris Godwin. So I was kind of playing that scenario out where maybe, have Rice and then transition to Godwin until Rice comes back. So at least you know what you're dealing with. I think Rice is just, again, number 3 fantasy receiver. You get a great start for potentially Travis Kelce, fantastic start for Xavier Worthy. And Worthy may be the one who doesn't give up the role in terms of who's the best receiver for the Chiefs rest of season. So Marquise Brown gets a boost. Maybe Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, those type of guys get a boost. Nobody's drafting them with any sort of confidence. I think Marquise Brown maybe gets off to a good start. We'll see how that sort of impacts him. And for Patrick Mahomes, look, you might want to bring him back down to the Baker Mayfield level comparatively to where he was closer to the top 5 guys, the Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow being the bottom 2 of that group. So for me, Mayfield is potentially a better option to start the season. But I think Mahomes still stays at QB6. Worthy's a great round 4 pick right now, maybe round 5. And then Rice I would look for in the round 7 range.
I think it stinks because I loved the idea of, all right, I've got Rice for a little bit at the beginning of the year, and then I've got him for the fantasy playoff run, and in between
But we didn't know that
out.
We didn't know that, though.
But we figured that he was going to play those first 4 games. Then we didn't know how long the suspension was going to be. That's fair. We didn't know if it was going to be 6, 8, 10 games. But he did have a chance to come back toward the end of the season. Now I know that I don't have him for 7 of the first 10 weeks of my fantasy football season. That's tough to deal with. That's going to be tough to look at. And if you draft him, that rules out getting guys that are going to get off to a slow start or suspended to begin the year, like Jordan Addison, like Chris Godwin. Those are guys I would have paired with Rashee Rice if Rice were going to play the first 4 games of the year. And so I thought about it a little bit, and I agree he's more of a number 3 receiver, but I think I'm going to move him down into late round 6. And when I draft him, it's going to be with the idea of, okay, I've got at least 2 wide receivers already, and I'm going to like maybe a couple of wide receivers I could get in round 7. And then I'm good on wide receiver. I can start with that core 4 to begin my draft and to begin my season. I'm not going to try and find a replacement on the Chiefs like Marquise Brown or Tyquan Thornton. I am a little more interested in Travis Kelce, believe it or not. Yeah. Because 13.9 PPR points per game in the 13 games without Rashee Rice last year, that's pretty good. And even if he's at 11.5 PPR points per game, okay, that's not somebody I'm going to take in the first 5 or 6 rounds, but it's somebody that I'd be interested in at tight end. I'd settle for Travis Kelce. I still think Mahomes is going to have a great year. I'm going to keep him right where I have him as the 6th quarterback off the board.
Just to give you a real-life situation, just as a Rashee Rice fantasy manager who drafted him last week, this is our IDP league, Adam, so you're in this league as well. Again, this was the majority of offensive players still coming off the board. So I started 2 receivers in the first 2 picks were Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua. Rice is a 3-receiver league, so I think this is different than a 2-receiver league where it's easier to get by. So Rashee Rice is the 3rd receiver that I have on this roster. I also have Christian Kirk, so that's a great replacement option because Kirk, great start of the season in terms of a schedule, guy you can get later and pair with Rice, and then you see what happens with Kirk moving forward. I also did purposely draft Marquise Brown, so the only thing I would disagree, Dave, is I don't mind Marquise Brown in a deeper league as a potential replacement option because, look, he's a proven commodity. He should do well knowing the system, knowing the offense, and they are going to diversify some of the targets, not just funneling them through Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce.
Adam, one last thing. Here are some wide receivers that are going, this is according to our ADP, 80th overall or later. You tell me if you'd love to pair these guys.
Oh, I'll do one better for you with 120th or later, but go ahead.
Well, let's do 120th then. And if
you got Marvin Mims,
120th.
Rashid Shaheed. These guys could potentially get off.
Yeah, but do you really want to start Marvin Mims or Rashid Shaheed
Demario
for
Douglas,
7 weeks?
No, but you want to take shots on guys later, especially if, first off,
you're doing that anyway, though.
If you drafted Rice, you want to look for some guys off waivers. Jalen Coker now with the Adam Thielen trade. Like, there are guys you can find very, very late or on waiver wire options right now that can help you.
Yeah, but that's not who I'm going. Oh man, I lost Rashee Rice. I'm going to start Jalen Coker. Dave is right. You take shots on those guys no matter what. But Dave is, if you're just going to give us names of guys we can get around 8 or later or whatever that we can just throw in our starting lineup confidently. Yeah, let's hear some names.
This is according to ADP. I don't think you're actually going to see all these guys, but Stephon Diggs is going to be there. Cooper Kupp is going to be there. Michael Pittman's going to be there. Rome Odunze, I doubt he makes it. Chris Olave would be a dream at this point. Same thing with Matthew Golden. And why is Brandon Aubrey a top 110 pick? What's wrong with you guys taking a kicker that early? That's really about it. Khalil Shakir. Keon Coleman, my guy, is still a round 10 pick in our ADP. I would love to get Keon Coleman and use him as the replacement to begin the year over Rashee Rice. So you can find some receivers, Adam, after that round 6, 7 range that you could use as a wide receiver 3 if you decide to take Rashee Rice in round 6.
All right, last thing I'm going to say. Now, look, they played the Chargers twice last year, and they were both very low-scoring games. But I look at their first 6 games, and I see some shootout potential here. So for a guy like Worthy or Kelce, get you off to a big start. You do have the Chargers. You get the Eagles. You get the Giants. You get the Ravens, Jaguars, Lions. I see some opportunities here for some big, fun Chiefs games, and maybe Worthy and Kelce get off to huge starts. That'd be fun. Okay, those are guys we want to draft. How about guys we don't want to draft? This is based on average draft position on CBS, and we're going to do quarterbacks and tight ends here. And Dave, your quarterback advice is less about specific players and more about reading the draft room, reading the ADP. And you're saying don't draft anyone in the first or second round in a one quarterback league. What else are you saying?
Well, first of all, you don't want to reach for a quarterback under any circumstances. Obviously, it's different if it's a super flex league or if you can start 2 quarterbacks. You will go ahead and take one of the elite quarterbacks as soon as 101 in your draft. But you really want to feel like you're getting a fair value at the quarterback position in general. And the other player that really worries me is Justin Fields. He's moved outside of my top 12. I've thought about moving him outside of my top 15. I don't know if I'm ready to go that far because I recognize that he has all that rushing upside, and I also recognize that he's a cheap player when you're drafting him in round 9, round 10. You could find a replacement if he stinks early on. But I really think that when it comes to the quarterback position, just think fair. Try and get a player at a draft value that you go, okay, this seems about right, or even better, okay, I'm ripping off the rest of my league, and you can go ahead and have that quarterback, and he'll be good to go for your team.
So on this topic, Patrick Mahomes' ADP has been around 50th overall. And I know Jamey's been very consistent saying not interested there. And now Rashee Rice out the first 6 games. When would you guys consider taking Patrick Mahomes?
Round 6 at the earliest. I just think, again, when you talk about the players that are in that round 4 range, he's actually back into round 4. He's at like 48th or 47th overall last time I looked last night. So he's continuing to move forward. Now, I do think, again, if you're looking at our ADP, the one complaint I have is that it does not separate one quarterback in Superflex leagues. So whatever percentage of leagues that we're talking about there, it's pushing up all those quarterbacks. So really when I look at it, I look at the list. So I don't mind Mahomes as the 6th quarterback off the board. But again, if you are drafting him in round 4, and that is where you have to reach for him, I am essentially out on Mahomes. And really for the most part, probably out on Baker Mayfield as well because he's not going soon after that. So I think just for those 2 quarterbacks in particular, like by comparison, Justin Fields is outside the top 12, and I think still has top 10 upside. So I understand where Dave's concern is. Clearly, if you're not in the Justin Fields camp, you're going to avoid it. But if he's not being drafted as a top 12 quarterback, there's just so much upside that if you are a Jared Goff guy, easy one to pair with a Justin Fields because Goff's floor is safe. Fields' ceiling could be immensely higher than what Goff is going to produce this year. So it's just a matter of, I think, what you're looking at. For me, like, I am avoiding, Dave brought up, the guys that are going in round 2. I can't imagine, for me, I understand why a lot of people would do it, but for me, if you're going to take a quarterback that early, it better be somebody that you think is going to be what Lamar Jackson was last year. So why not just take Lamar Jackson? Josh Allen was 5 points per game less than what Lamar Jackson produced last year. Allen was the 4th quarterback last year behind Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow, and obviously Lamar Jackson. So for him to be the first quarterback off the board, I don't get it. Based on what we saw last year, they were fantastic offensively. They did a great job. He was the MVP. Are things going to change? I think Lamar Jackson is going to probably produce at a similar level or close to it. And if you're just talking about ceiling play for these guys based on what we've seen in the last couple of years, when Lamar Jackson spikes, he's at a better level than Josh Allen. So if you're going to reach for a quarterback, Jackson should be first off the board. Allen should not be going in round 2 by any stretch, in my opinion.
Didn't Josh Allen have a couple of 50-point games last year? He's got some pretty good spike
potential,
too.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing. But again, to be 5 points per game different than the guy he's now being drafted ahead of, I wouldn't do it.
What about the consistency for Josh Allen?
I have to jump in there because the reason he's 5 points worse is because he played 1 snap in Week 18. He is now still a huge gap. 26.6 points per game if you remove Week 18.
Okay, so 4 points per game. Sorry.
30. No, you're right.
Changes everything.
I want to get the right. He was, if you took out that game, you took out everyone's partial games, those top 5 quarterbacks. Allen was QB2, way behind Lamar Jackson in 4-point, and he was QB3 behind Jackson and Burrow in 6-point. You're still absolutely right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be a jerk.
I think it's very offensive.
I think if you're going to Azer-stat Baker Mayfield the 4 games he didn't have Mike Evans or Chris Godwin too.
You could Azer-stat all the games that Lamar Jackson didn't finish either because they were blowing out teams.
No, that does not count.
The reason why I like Allen better, by the way, 27.2, 26.5, 29.1, 26.9.
And
those are his fantasy averages each of the last 4 years.
Not one season better than Lamar Jackson.
Not one season better, but Lamar was 30.1. That was last year. It was amazing. 23.7 before that, 22.5 before that, 21.6 before that. I feel a little bit safer with Josh Allen than Lamar Jackson, but I'm not going to fight you on this. They're both awesome.
I think, though,
try and get one of them at a fair value.
If you want to go sample size, do sample sizes with their new coordinators. So what Lamar Jackson's done with Greg Roman versus what Josh Allen's done with Joe Brady.
I bet it's pretty close.
I think Jackson's better.
Because of last year.
Oh, yeah, Allen was better in 23 and Jackson was better in 24. But last point, Jackson has averaged over 8 yards per attempt both seasons with Greg Roman, with Todd
Monken.
Todd Monken. Unbelievable efficiency. Okay, let's talk about tight ends here. Dave, 3 tight ends on your do not draft list. Does this still apply? We submitted this list before the Rashee Rice news. Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson.
Well, obviously it still applies for the non-Chiefs tight ends, but with Kelce, his average draft position before this news was just after round 5. So we're talking about early round 6. Even in full PPR, I think that's too rich for me. I know that he's got potential to be what he was last year. And what he was last year wasn't great, but it was still like a top 6 fantasy tight end. It was still 12 PPR points per game. You're not going to turn your nose up at that when you go to the waiver wire and you hope to find a guy that gets you 9 or 10 PPR points off the waiver wire. But if that's what he's going to do, if it's going to be 12, maybe 13 PPR points per game on average, I don't want to take that in round 6. I'd rather start to think about targeting Rashee Rice in that range rather than getting Travis Kelce. Plus, I know that I can find another tight end that I think has the same type of upside at least 2 rounds later, if not 3 or 4 rounds later. With Hawkinson, I think he can get us off to a great start in Minnesota because Jordan Addison's not playing, but once Addison's back, and now that they added Adam Thielen, I think that'll take a few targets away. I see his average draft position in round 7, round 8. I think that's too rich. And Mark Andrews, if he doesn't have that huge touchdown number last year, we are forgetting about this guy. And I think he's going to end up being somebody that we're going to wish we took around 100th overall, Mark Andrews, because I don't know if he's going to have the same type of touchdown numbers. I'm pretty sure he's going to have the same type of target volume. That was around 4.5 per game. This Ravens offense, they love to run the ball to begin with, but they added DeAndre Hopkins to their receiving core. He's great in the red zone. Makes me nervous to take any of those 3 tight ends at their current ADP.
And Jamey, you have Sam Laporta, who's going way too early for you on your do not draft list.
Yeah, I'm going to move Kelce ahead of Laporta with the Rice news, so he'll now be tight end 6 for me because Njoku's already tight end 4. I love Laporta. I mean, I think he's got an opportunity to still be a good number 1 fantasy tight end, a top 10 fantasy tight end. And the way that they closed the season, the way he closed the season, was what we saw from him in his rookie campaign. But now they've just found another target with Tesla, and I think we're going to see him be involved. You can't not listened to anybody out of Detroit talking about a breakout season for Jameson Williams. Last I checked, Amon-Ra St. Brown's not going anywhere. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a bigger role in the passing game. Well, it's got to come at the expense of somebody here. So if he's not scoring touchdowns, very similar to what Dave said about Mark Andrews, Laporta's going to let you down. So I think once you start to separate these guys, there's the top three without question. Then I think there's a tier of two with Njoku and Kelce at this point. And then Laporta falls into that next group of guys, which includes T.J. Hockenson, Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews, Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft. Like, it's a good group of tight ends, but I don't think you want to reach for these guys. And the fact that Laporta's going around round 5 at this point on CBS Sports, just too soon.
That's too soon. By the way, do you worry about Kelce when Rashee Rice does come back? Because last year his numbers were.
I'm looking at, well, to be fair, they also flipped their switch, if they're going to do that again at the end of the season. So we get past the first 6 games, maybe we get a little bit of a lull while Rice works himself back in, and then you get that, Travis Kelce.
Right, but I don't want him to be a dud
production.
in the fantasy playoffs.
There wasn't that much separation for me to begin with between Laporta and Kelce right now. And so the 6-game head start that we might get from Kelce, I think it's worth it to take him ahead of him.
Well, just looking at my podcast league team, starting Patrick Mahomes and Sam Laporta. Not sure Jamey's going to like that team too much.
No, you drafted those guys at good value. There's a big difference. When you get them at the right cost. I took Breece Hall. How many times have you heard me say I'm not drafting him?
Right.
Speaking of which, when we come back, running backs on our do not draft list. After this on Fantasy Football Today. Don't draft Saquon Barkley 3rd overall. That's just silly. Don't draft Alvin Kamara 27th overall. Come on, people. This is Jamey's do not draft list at running back. It is based on average draft position on CBSSports.com. And Jamey, take it away. What do you got?
Well, it's funny. We were just discussing one of our leagues, and so Dave passed on a lot of running backs in our podcast league. I ended up taking Breece Hall as the 3rd running back in round 5. So at the right cost, I'll obviously take any of the guys on this list. And so Dave's got a surplus of wide receivers. We might have a trade potential option here.
I'll trade you Jalen Coker for Breece Hall.
You know what? That might be worth the same amount of value. In the case of Barkley, it's not necessarily a do not draft because I still have him ranked as a 1st-round pick, but it's not taking him in the first 3 overall picks, which is where his average draft position is. So I'm still a little concerned, obviously coming off all the work that he had a year ago, the history of 2,000-yard rushers and what happens to them the following season. So if he just follows suit with those other 8 guys and loses 500 yards at the minimum, and 6 of the 8 have lost over 800 yards the next season, he could still be a 1,500-yard rusher and still compete to be a 2,000-yard total player. But it's just a big concern for a running back of his age who's had some injury concerns over the course of his career, who's on the Madden cover, coming off a lot of games played and certainly a lot of work based on what we saw last year with over 400 touches, over 400 carries, over 480 total touches. So it's just a concern that Saquon Barkley's not going to live up to the expectations. In the case of the other guys, that's really where the average draft position comes in. Now, I do like the fact that Breece Hall is falling. He was originally a 3rd-round pick. Now we're seeing him into round 4. Maybe he gets to round 5. I'm very excited about Braylon Allen. He's going to be somebody I have one of my most rostered players because we're going to see a split to some degree between those 2 guys. Justin Fields is going to steal rushing production and potentially rushing touchdowns. And Breece Hall I just don't think is even taking in round 4. I would take him in round 5. Aaron Jones going in the round 5 range. I do not like that at all. I think we're going to see a split situation there in Minnesota between Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. They've talked about that from Jones himself to Kevin O'Connell, even before they brought Aaron Jones back as a free agent. So I'm not going to probably take a lot of Aaron Jones on my fantasy leagues this year. And then when you look at some of these other guys, Joe Mixon is basically just a do not draft at all at this point because we don't know when he's going to return for a 29-year-old running back coming off a foot injury that he's yet to practice even going back to the spring. Quinshon Judkins yet to sign his contract. We don't know when we're going to see him. So a guy that I'm probably just going to avoid, I'll take Dylan Sampson first, even Jerome Ford. We don't know if Judkins will play at all in his rookie season. And Caleb Johnson is just somebody that makes me nervous overall based on what his role could be because for an older quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, the way that the other 2 guys do and how they perform in pass protection, Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell specifically, we could see both those guys playing ahead of Caleb Johnson at this point. And just the fact that he could be a trap back where he may not get as many goal line opportunities as we like, definitely not going to play in a lot of obvious passing down situations. So Caleb Johnson may not be somebody you can rely on until the end of the year, if that. So I think it'd be a lost rookie season for Caleb Johnson playing in an Arthur Smith offense along with that.
Yeah, Caleb Johnson, just confirming, he was a 3rd-round pick this year, right? So according to my notes, in the last 10 seasons going into 2025, not including 2025, we've had 31 running backs selected in round 3. 4 of them 4 finished top 20. David Johnson, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, and Antonio Gibson as rookies. David Montgomery was a 5th who finished top 24. Doesn't include Devon Achane, who was 25th, but he was amazing. He was 4th overall. But there is a really bad history of round 3 rookies. So just going to throw that in there. I think we've sort of taken this rookie draft class and kind of boosted a lot of players up based on history because it's such a strong class. Ordinarily, we wouldn't really even care about a guy like Jaden Blue or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, these day 3 picks. They hardly ever do anything. But this year's draft class was so strong at running back that we are making some exceptions. Round 3 running back at history.
I said this last week, and I'll reiterate it just because you brought up his name. I will take Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt over Caleb Johnson this year.
Okay. Dave, who's on your do not draft list at running back?
I have a lot of the same names, so really I'm only going to focus on the one name that's different, and that's DeAndre Swift in Chicago. He's always been a low-end number 2 fantasy running back, never really performed like a top 20 or top 15 running back. Maybe once over his career he did. Even when Ben Johnson was his coordinator in Detroit, it wasn't a great season for him, and then after that, the Lions traded him to Philadelphia for one of those aforementioned day 3 picks. Now, I get the argument for DeAndre Swift. He's the only back right now in Chicago's backfield that looks like is going to get a decent amount of touches. I still think Chicago is going to add another running back along the way. It might not be somebody of major significance, but it's going to be somebody who's going to take Swift off the field to some degree. It could be at the goal line, could be in short yardage situations. It might even be on some passing downs because of pass protection concerns that the Bears have because that offensive line, it's been a problem all training camp long, all preseason long. Things that are definitely an issue for DeAndre Swift. And I don't think he's necessarily a great running back talent-wise to begin with. So I'm going to avoid him this year. I'm not going to take him in that round 5 range where his ADP is. And it just makes me want to gravitate towards some other running backs that are in that range, may not have the same type of workload that DeAndre Swift will begin the season with, but should outperform him based on his track record in the NFL.
And Adam, just one more guy, just because I think his name clearly carries a lot of weight, is Alvin Kamara. Look, he has a chance to still be a very successful fantasy option. We saw that last year, even with Spencer Rattler, 4 games that they played together, 3 of them, 17 or more PPR points. As you will note, which I know you do all the time, Chris Olave and Rashee Rice did not play in those games, so we'll see how that impacts just in terms of his role in the passing game. Kellen Moore's track record, kudos to our colleague Heath Cummings, is not good in terms of enhancing pass-catching running backs. He had Austin Eckler in his prime. He had, or at least the end of his prime. He had Saquon Barkley, who's still a very good pass catcher, in my opinion. Did not allow those guys to play in, or to get the type of passing volume that they needed, or at least have had in the past. And if Kamara loses that, taking him in round 3 is a huge mistake, absolute huge mistake. I think he should go closer to the back end of round 4, maybe even round 5, and that's in full PPR.
And I don't mind Kamara. I'll take him in late round 3, but it has to be full PPR. If it's half PPR, if it's non-PPR, I'm definitely taking a big step back from that. And you look at the average draft position, even I can't agree with it because the ADP says that he's a top 30 pick. And I get it. The reason why I like him is because he's had at least 5 targets per game every year of his career. He's had about 17 PPR points per game or more all but 1 year of his career. We're drafting him. If we're getting him in round 4, we're drafting him where even if he doesn't get 17 PPR points per game, he still could be a very good pick if it's 14 and a half. 15 PPR.
But not if he loses the passing volume.
Well, sure. If all of that gets thrown out the window, then he's a total dud. But I don't see that happening because that's so integral to his game.
But it's not.
It is his game.
But it's not integral to his coach, and that's what matters more.
I think the coach might be able to work around that and involve him a little bit more,
I hope so.
Especially given all the other issues that they've got in that passing offense.
Well, let's find out which wide receivers we have issues with because you get some big names there at running back based on ADP. We're going to take a break on fantasy football today and come back and talk about the wide receivers on our do not draft list. We are back here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, and I'm just going to say right now, Dave, I absolutely hate your first, I don't hate the player. I hate that you have him on your list. The first player on your do not draft list at wide receiver is Tyreek Hill. What's going on? I feel like Tyreek Hill has had no buzz this training camp, and now all of a sudden everybody hates him again, and he's still going to be great. So take that. You have Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, and Zay Flowers on your do not draft list.
The reason why Tyreek Hill has no buzz is because he's barely been practicing with the Miami Dolphins, which is a little concerning. You'll see the injury tag next to his name. An oblique, I don't think it's a major deal. It wouldn't stop me from drafting him. But what does seem to keep me from drafting him is that Tua Tagovailoa just doesn't seem to be letting go of the whole situation, argument, whatever you want to call it, at the end of last season that seemed to erode the relationship between Tyreek and Tua. And when I've watched them practice, and I've been to their camp a couple of times, Tua Tagovailoa looks great throwing to Jalen Waddle. And Tyreek Hill is either not practicing or not getting a lot of the targets. That could obviously flip on its head. But there's other issues too, Adam. That offensive line hasn't been very good. Tua himself hasn't been particularly great. Some of the other wide receivers that they have been stepping up in spurts. And I just wonder if maybe the idea of Tyreek Hill being a 20-point per game fantasy receiver is out the window now. And now if you draft him, you have to hope that the ceiling is more like 16 or 17. And the floor is where he was last year. It was 12 PPR points per game. That's pathetic. And so I see his ADP. It's in early round 4. I'm a late round 4 guy now on Tyreek Hill. I really just don't want to have a piece of him. I want to try and avoid this Dolphins passing game if I can.
First of all, didn't you? I thought you gave a great stat that his points per game. Do you remember what it was just with Tua?
It probably was very good last year. I can look it up and tell you, but I don't know if
it wasn't amazing or anything. He was on pace for 87 catches, 1,073 yards, 9 touchdowns on 134 targets with Tua. That's not great production.
It was 14.9 PPR points per game.
Right. So he's much better than what he was last year because the non-Tua games were awful for everyone. I don't want to get stuck on just him, but round 4 is I thought you'd be happy to get him there. Okay, all right, that's your call. It's your call. Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, the other guys on your list.
Sure. Garrett Wilson is catching passes from Justin Fields. That's a problem. And now the fact that the Jets want to be such a run-heavy offense, I think they're going to want to be slow-paced too. They want to use 3 running backs. Justin Fields himself will run with the football. That makes me worry about just how many targets per game Garrett Wilson's going to get. Garrett Wilson had 9 targets per game last year. He didn't even average 15 PPR points per game. That makes me very, very nervous, and I think he had a slightly better quarterback last year than what he's got this year. Zay Flowers, the talent is great. We talk about him all the time as one of the most phenomenal receivers in the game, but he's on a team that also loves to run the football. They don't have high passing volume. There has never been a wide receiver that has averaged north of 15 PPR points per game since Lamar Jackson has been a starting quarterback. And you might say, okay, well, I'm not drafting Zay Flowers for that. I'm drafting him to be around 13 or 14 PPR points per game. And he hasn't even been able to hit that mark in either of his first 2 years in the NFL. So I love Zay Flowers, the talent. I hate Zay Flowers, the fantasy wide receiver. He's somebody that I'm going to let other people draft. And DJ Moore, going back to one more team that's got, you kind of sense a trend with the offensive line. I don't like the offensive line in Miami. I don't like it in Chicago. I think the quarterbacks are affected by this. Caleb Williams is certainly going to be affected by his offensive line giving up pressure. We saw that in the preseason game. And DJ Moore just seems like he's more of a short area target now for Chicago and not a downfield threat. You saw the Bears not only get a lot out of Odunze in the preseason game, they've gotten a lot out of Odunze in training camp. They added Colson Loveland. Luther Burden is going to have a role eventually. Olamide Zaccheaus is going to have a role eventually. I think the target volume is going to come down for DJ Moore. I'm nervous that I'm too high on DJ Moore, and he's not even a top 24 wide receiver for me, Adam.
Okay. I think Jamey might agree with you because we look at Jamey's do not draft list at wide receiver, and DJ Moore is on there. Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, Deebo Samuel, and Michael Pittman. So you guys share DJ Moore and Zay Flowers. Jamey also has Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and Michael Pittman. People, I feel like, Jamey, I look at the Fantasy Pros, the real-time ADP. It's very updated, very current. It seems like people don't care that Terry McLaurin has missed all of training camp and just signed. They are ignoring the history, and you are not.
Well, look, it's a small sample size, but again, you had 4 players over the last 2 seasons, 5 in total. One was Jamar Chase, and he was amazing, and I hope that's the case for Terry McLaurin. But the other 4 guys, 2 running backs in 2023, 2 receivers in 2024, the 2 running backs, Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor, had awful seasons, career lows for Jacobs, and second worst season of his career for Jonathan Taylor. Both missed time due to injury. In the case of the 2 wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb struggled with a shoulder injury, so he got hurt at some point during the season and had a down year, was 23 PPR points per game in 2023. barely over 17. Granted, he lost his quarterback after the season, but still wasn't having a great year before that. And Brandon Ayuk was miserable before he suffered the knee injury. Only one game in double digits in PPR points before he suffered the knee injury. So I'm just a little bit concerned for McLaurin. And look, had there not been an issue across the board for him, I would be drafting him as a top 20 receiver, but I'd still have concerns because of just the touchdown spike. And so can he still be a double-digit touchdown guy? I hope so, because I think that's going to have to justify where he's being drafted, which is still round 4. And this is with the idea of him still dealing with the contract situation. I think once we get through all the drafts this weekend, we may see him closer to that round 3 range, and for sure I'm out on him. And the reason I have Deebo Samuel on this list is not that I'm anti-Washington by any stretch. It's the fact of where he's getting drafted, which I do think factors in the situation with Terry McLaurin. He's being drafted right now ahead of, you could throw out Rashee Rice and Jacoby Myers if you want to. I would take Rice over Deebo Samuel still personally. He's being drafted ahead of Jalen Waddle, ahead of Travis Hunter, ahead of Emeka Egbuka, ahead of Rome Odunze. I would take over him. So there's just a handful of guys right now where Deebo Samuel, just in terms of who he's going ahead of, I would much rather have those guys instead of Samuel, especially now that McLaurin is back.
Yeah, love it. And Pittman, we talked about this morning on our podcast. We can't really understand why Michael Pittman is a top 100 ADP and why he's up 21 spots. We suspect it's because of the Josh Downs injury, but Downs may not miss much time at all.
He's expected to be back by week 1.
Yeah. So there's a list for you. For Dave, it was Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, Zay Flowers. For Jamey, it was Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, Deebo Samuel, and Michael Pittman. And for me, it was a chance to say, that's your call, that's your call, that's your call, that's your call, like 6 times in a row, whatever it was. All right, we'll be right back with Name That Player on Fantasy Football Today. Let's play some Name That Player. I love Name That Player here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm going old. Some older guys here on Name That Player. First one, I am a fairly old wide receiver. Per game, I have only 2 top 24 finishes and 1 top 15 finish in my career. I finished last season with 76 or more yards in 3 straight games, but I was massively out-targeted by my tight end. In other words, his tight end on his team. I had 120 targets, but only 3 end zone targets. How is that possible? And I will be playing with a rookie quarterback.
Jamey.
Yes,
Calvin Ridley.
Calvin Ridley is correct. It's a little bit of an overrated career. He is not, since that bust-out year with the Falcons, he really hasn't been that great, honestly. And we're not drafting him to be a top 24, but we're hopeful. We're hopeful for Calvin Ridley. How are you feeling about him right now?
I think he's in the right range, so that round 5, 6 range of wide receivers, basically anywhere from 23 through 33. He belongs in that kind of, group of guys with Jerry Jeudy and Travis Hunter, and for me, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, those type of guys who have the chance to be top 20. I don't know if there's a top 10 range of outcomes unless they just score a lot of touchdowns. But you said it, or at least you alluded to this. I think the target should be there for him. The production should be there for him. I also think Chigga Okonkwo is a very underrated late round tight end, based on how you alluded to this with the clue that his target volume should be there as well. But in the case of Ridley, the numbers that he had last year with Will Levis versus Mason Rudolph, he was about 12 fantasy PPR points per game with Will Levis. He was north of 14 PPR points per game with Rudolph. If Cam Ward is just better than Will Levis, then I think we're going to get some very solid production from Calvin Ridley. So he's I think cheap enough. He's not going to get drafted at this point ahead of Egbuka, at least in my opinion, ahead of Egbuka and Ricky Pearsall. Yeah. So there's going to be some excitement for those guys. And just sort of like when you get to that range of maybe your number 2 receiver, for me to at the very minimum be my 3rd receiver, there's still reason to buy into him. So yes, he's old-ish. Hasn't lived up to a lot of the expectations the last couple of years, Jacksonville and Tennessee. But I think the quarterback play will definitely help him.
I think he's got sneaky good upside. I think he might end up getting, you mentioned the targets, I think he could end up getting 8 per game. He's the only guy, I saw them practice against the Bucs. He's the only guy Cam Ward had his timing and chemistry with. Every other receiver they had struggled with Cam Ward, not Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be used a lot in this offense. I know people are, they don't want to draft him because he's been so bad for so long. I think he steps up and has a pretty good year this year. So I love what you're thinking. And this is another receiver much rather have than Rashee Rice right now.
Ridley had, in his last year with Jacksonville, 26 red zone and 24 end zone targets. Last year, 7 red zone and 3 end zone targets. And 8 targets per game would be... No, 8 targets per game would be 136 targets. He actually was on pace for 130 targets after the DeAndre Hopkins trade. All right, so first round goes to Jamey. Second one, I am kind of an old tight end. Among 31 tight ends with 50 or more targets, I ranked 31st, dead last in yards per target. I have never averaged more than 55 yards per game. I have never caught more than 6 touchdowns. I have been a top 8 tight end per game in 3 straight seasons.
Whoa.
I will be playing with the very opposite of a rookie quarterback this year, a super old quarterback. Jamey and Dave love drafting me.
Jamey.
Yes.
David Njoku.
Yes, David Njoku. Don't
He's
worry,
never
Dave.
averaged
Round
more
3.
than 55 yards a game.
It's a little deceiving because
I thought so. Here we go.
No, he's dealt with some injuries, but no, it's true. I mean, he's been consistently good, and at times he's been great. At each of the last 3 years, there's been at least a 5-game spurt where David Njoku's been awesome. And then, Deshaun Watson comes around or something like that. But one of those spurts was with Flacco. So am I drafting David Njoku thinking there's a chance for him to have a really awesome year, or he's going to have 850 yards, 6 touchdowns, and be like tight end 7?
I think, well, first off, if he's tight end 7, he's being drafted as tight end 7, unless you're just following our advice and you're taking him maybe ahead of some guys, because you want him not where the ADP suggests. But I mean, look, I think when you're drafting him, I'll speak from when I'm drafting him with the hope that I'm getting 10 plus games of Joe Flacco. You referenced those, that stretch of games at the end of 2023, depending if you factor in the playoff game or not, it was basically 16 points per game, PPR points per game or more over that stretch. So there was a strong connection there. You go back last year, Adam, you referenced this, when it wasn't Deshaun Watson, it was great for David Njoku. So this is a receiving core that's got a lot of moving parts. Jerry Jeudy was awesome to close the season last year. Cedric Tillman, the first 3 games without Amari Cooper, was awesome. We'll see what he can offer over the course of a full season. The running game is going to be very much in flux. Really, it comes down to if you buy Joe Flacco starting the majority of games and David Njoku staying healthy the majority of games, there could be a top 3 finish here. He could, push one of those top 3 guys out of it. I just think there's that much upside. Now, you're hearing a lot of positive buzz about Harold Fannin, so if we could see him taking on some targets and opportunities in the passing game, which could change some things. But I'm just looking at what David Njoku has done the last 2 seasons when there hasn't been Deshaun Watson, factoring in what Joe Flacco did for him in that 2023 campaign, factoring Kevin Stefanski's offense, which has always been tight and friendly. So there's just a lot to like about David Njoku, especially at his cost. So when you start to see Kelce come off the board, Laporta come off the board, let somebody else take those guys, you can wait and take Njoku a little bit later.
Yeah, I would co-sign that. I do worry a little bit about the sheer volume of targets that Njoku would get if Fannin and Cedric Tillman end up playing a solid role in the Browns offense. It's not going to be just Jeudy and Njoku anymore. Now it could be a couple of other mouths to feed for Joe Flacco, and their running backs can catch the ball out of the backfield too. But I still love what he does for Cleveland. He's a great short area outlet. He can make plays after the catch, big-time red zone threat if they so choose to use him. And because they don't have a great, or certainly an established run game right now, they might need Njoku in the red zone. So I'm fine with him as a top 5 fantasy tight end as well.
All right, we're just going to name that player for this, and we'll take a break after that, and we're going to answer your questions in our final segment. Triple the points. Here we go. I am an older running back. I averaged a career high in yards per carry last season. Now, only 4 times in the last decade has a running back averaged more than 19 PPR fantasy points per game with fewer than 20 catches, and all 4 times it's been me.
Jamey.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry.
Yep. That's my favorite stat. I've been a top 4 running back per game in all formats in 5 of the last 6 seasons. That's Derrick Henry. And you guys would draft him when?
end of round 1 in full PPR, middle of round 1 in half PPR, and top 5 overall in non-PPR. Look, I'm just tired of betting against him at this point. Like, I've been the anti-Derrick Henry guy for about 5 years, and I've been wrong every year. He just continues to defy Father Time. He's going to continue to be in a great offensive environment for him. He does not need to catch passes. Every time he's been on a team that has a winning record, Titans, Baltimore last year, he's been awesome because he does not need to catch passes to still score around 20 touchdowns. Last year, he had the most rushing yards in NFL history for a running back that was 30-year-olds or more. He's going to have the most rushing yards for a running back that's 31 years old or more. He's just amazing. So hopefully he stays healthy. I think it's worth taking him in round 1 and just forget about anything when it comes to what history tells you about older running backs. He just continues to give Father Time the stiff arm.
Absolutely.
Well done, fellas. All right, that's the Do Not Draft list. We'll name that player, Rashee Rice analysis. And now we get to finish with your questions. Ask FFT when we come back. Ask FFT from Jay. What are your feelings on drafting the Triple H trio as your starting running backs?
That was one of the worst things you've ever done.
Sorry. That's how I decided to read it. I'd have to reach for Hampton. At 2 you guys can just finish that. What do you think about taking Hampton over Chase Brown to get Triple H?
Yeah, don't do that. You could probably get Hampton in round 3 if you really want him, early round 3. But yeah, don't take him at Chase Brown. There's much more upside for Chase Brown, assuming that Brown does what he did at the end of last season, and there is Najee Harris with the Chargers.
Well, what if Brown doesn't do that? Then what? No, I'm with you on this one.
All right, next tweet.
Oh my gosh.
With a top 3 pick in a half PPR, 2 receiver, 2 flex league, would you be comfortable going tight end and then quarterback at the 2-3 turn, or would you prefer one of the running backs or wide receivers in that range?
I would prefer one of the running backs or wide receivers. I don't like taking a quarterback and a tight end with 2 of my first 5 picks. I think it just leaves me a little bit thin at running back and wide receiver later on in the draft. The smaller the league, we didn't see how many teams are in this league. If this is an 8-team league, maybe even a 10-team league, it's not as bad. But once you get to 12 teams, 14 teams, yeah, I think it's a big mistake to take a quarterback and a tight end so close to the top of the draft.
Take the tight end.
All right. Next up. I'm not reading. It was horrible. Drafting from the 9 spot in a 10-team. Oh, Superflex tight end premium. Tight end premium, the dumbest, most nonsensical format in sports history. How should I prioritize my first 2 picks in the Superflex tight end premium league?
Surprised you're saying that as a huge pro wrestling fan.
I would say in a 10-team league, you can, if you don't get one of the top 5 quarterbacks, if they don't fall, then I would consider taking Brock Bowers and Trey McBride at the 9 spot in a tight end premium league. And then you come back, if you want to, in round 2, and maybe take Mahomes or maybe take Baker Mayfield in that spot. But I would try and get one of the top 5 quarterbacks or one of the top 2 tight ends in this scoring format.
I agree.
All right, next tweet. Please don't be about a ridiculous made-up format. Are we still taking Justin Fields as a top 10 quarterback in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues?
All right, that's a legit format for you, Adam. I hope you're happy about that. And because passing touchdowns are devalued, that means that rushing touchdowns are good. Rushing yardage is good. Yes, Justin Fields would be a top 10 quarterback there.
Top 7 quarterback for me in that format.
We have time for one more, and it's from Wilson. Should the Steelers go after Anthony Richardson?
If they get him cheap, to see what he has for the future, it would have to be very cheap at this point. But, look, they have no quarterback situation moving forward past this year because of Aaron Rodgers. So it would have to be just the right investment.
Colts say they're keeping Richardson.
That's what they say, Dave. We'll see. That's it for Fantasy Football Today. Thanks so much for watching and listening, everyone. If you like the show, please check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. I want to thank Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. And, of course, thanks to all of you for watching and listening. I'm Adam Azer. Good luck in your drafts, everyone.